Long before calendars existed, before clocks learned how to count hours, before names were given to days or years, there was a moment that repeated itself for every human who ever lived. A moment of stillness. A moment when the fire grew quiet, when the hunt was over, when the world finally slowed enough for the sky to be noticed. And in that moment, someone, perhaps a child, perhaps an elder, looked up and felt something unsettling. Not fear exactly, not wonder alone, but the strange realization that the darkness above was not empty. Imagine standing thousands of years ago, barefoot on cool earth, the air carrying the scent of smoke and wild grass. There are no city lights, no glowing screens, no distant hum of machines. The night is complete, heavy, vast, and above you, the sky is not a flat black ceiling, but a deep ocean scattered with countless points of light. They do not flicker randomly. They do not rush. They simply are, watching, waiting, returning night after night in the same places, as if following rules no one on earth had written. For early humans, this was not just beauty. It was a question that pressed gently but persistently on the mind. Why are they there? Why do they move together? Why do some return every season while others wander slowly, almost deliberately, across the darkness? In a world where danger hid in every shadow and survival was never guaranteed, the sky offered something rare: consistency. The stars did not attack. They did not demand. They simply followed their paths, unbothered by human struggle. And yet they felt connected to it. At first, the stars were not stories. They were signals. Navigation for those who traveled at night. Timers for seasons that determined when to hunt, when to plant, when to prepare for cold. The rising of certain stars meant rain would come. The disappearance of others meant winter was close. Life below began to quietly align itself with movement above. And without realizing it, humanity took its first step toward meaning. Because once patterns are noticed, the mind cannot help but ask why they exist. And once why enters the picture, stories soon follow. It may have begun as whispers around fires. Someone pointing upward, tracing an invisible line between stars with a finger. That cluster looks like an animal. That shape reminds me of a hunter. That curve feels like a mother holding something precious. These were not declarations of truth. They were attempts at comfort, ways to turn the overwhelming vastness into something familiar, something human. In a dangerous world, familiarity was safety. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the night sky transformed. No longer just a ceiling of light. It became a mirror, a place where human fears, hopes, and questions could be projected without resistance. The stars did not argue. They did not correct. They accepted every story placed upon them. And in doing so, they became sacred. There is something deeply psychological in this act. To look up at something unimaginably large and feel that it somehow reflects your own life is not ignorance. It is instinct. Humans have always searched for reassurance that their struggles matter, that suffering is not random, that existence follows some kind of rhythm. The stars, with their endless patience, seem to promise exactly that. Night after night, generation after generation, the same lights appeared. Children grew into adults beneath them. Adults aged and disappeared, while the stars remained unchanged. This alone was powerful. In a life so fragile and brief, the sky offered permanence, and permanence invites meaning. Over time, the stories grew more detailed. Animals became heroes. Heroes became gods. God became symbols of forces too vast to control: love, war, fertility, destruction, time itself. The sky became crowded with narratives, each one carrying lessons about how to live, what to fear, and what to hope for. And yet, beneath all of it, the original feeling remained unchanged. That quiet tension between insignificance and belonging. Because when you stare into the night long enough, two opposing truths emerge. You are impossibly small, and yet you are part of something unimaginably large. This realization can be terrifying, or it can be soothing. For ancient people, it was often both. The stars reminded them that their lives were fleeting, but also that they were woven into a cosmic order that did not begin with them and would not end with them. Their joys and losses, births and deaths, were echoes in a much larger rhythm. As societies grew, this rhythm became organized. Priests, astronomers, and scholars began to map the sky with precision. What once were casual stories slowly hardened into systems. The stars were divided, named, categorized. Their movements were recorded. Their cycles were calculated. What had begun as storytelling became something closer to cosmic bookkeeping. But the emotional core never disappeared. Even as astrology took shape, as charts and symbols emerged, it remained rooted in the same ancient desire to understand one's place in the universe, not to control fate, but to feel less alone within it. And this is where the zodiac truly begins, not as prediction, not as personality labels, but as a human response to silence, to darkness, to the unsettling calm of a universe that does not explain itself. The zodiac was an attempt to listen to the sky when it did not speak back, to translate motion into meaning, to believe that time itself had a story and that humans were characters within it. When people later spoke of signs influencing birth, behavior, or destiny, they were not claiming certainty. They were expressing relationship, a belief that the moment you arrived in the world mattered, because the sky itself marked it, that your beginning was acknowledged by something eternal. And in that belief, there was comfort. Tonight, as you listen and perhaps imagine those same stars hanging quietly above you, it's worth remembering that you are looking at an ancient companion, the same sky that watched over early fires, over first fears, over first stories. The same patterns that guided lost travelers and inspired forgotten myths still drift overhead, unchanged in their silence. They do not demand belief. They never did. They only invite reflection. And as the world below grows quiet once more, as thoughts slow and the body begins to rest, the sky remains patient, distant, and endlessly familiar, waiting, as it always has, for someone to look up and feel that old, gentle question stir again. When the fire burned low and the sounds of the land softened into night, something subtle changed in the way humans experienced the world. The ground beneath their feet faded into darkness. Trees became silhouettes, and familiar paths disappeared. Vision, once sharp and practical, could no longer be trusted. And so, instinctively, the gaze lifted upward. What remained visible when everything else vanished was the sky, wide, calm, unmoving in its vastness, yet quietly alive with light. Unlike the chaos of life on Earth, the night sky carried a strange order. The stars did not scatter randomly. They rose and set with patience, tracing arcs so slow they felt eternal. Even without understanding distance or physics, early humans sensed that these lights followed rules, rules older than memory, rules untouched by hunger, fear, or war. And this contrast, the unpredictable world below and the steady world above, created something powerful. Trust. Trust is rare when survival is uncertain, but the sky earned it. Night after night, the same stars returned to the same places. Seasons came and went, children were born, elders disappeared, yet the patterns overhead endured. This reliability transformed the sky into a kind of silent language. It did not speak with words, but with repetition, with timing, with presence. At first, this language was practical. Hunters learned which stars marked the safest hours to travel. Nomadic groups followed certain constellations across vast distances, letting the heavens guide their feet when landmarks failed. Farmers watched the rising of specific stars to know when floods would come, when soil would soften, when seeds should meet the earth. The sky became a calendar long before numbers existed, a clock long before hours were counted. But practicality alone does not explain the depth of connection humans developed with the night sky. There was something else at work, something quieter. When people sat beneath the stars, especially in moments of exhaustion or grief, they felt observed, not judged, but acknowledged, as if the universe itself was bearing witness to their lives. This feeling did not require belief. It emerged naturally from stillness. Silence has a way of making thoughts louder. And the night sky, vast and soundless, gave those thoughts room to stretch. Questions surfaced that daylight distractions kept buried. Why are we here? What happens when we die? Does anything remain after the body fades? The stars offered no answers, yet their presence softened the weight of the questions. Sometimes, not knowing felt safer than knowing. Over time, people began to notice that not all stars behave the same way. Some remained fixed in their patterns, while others wandered slowly across the sky. These wandering lights, later called planets, felt deliberate, almost intentional. They moved against a backdrop of stillness, like thoughts drifting through a quiet mind. This difference mattered. It suggested hierarchy, purpose, motion within order. And so the language of the sky grew more complex. Fixed stars became symbols of permanence. Wandering stars became messengers of change. The moon, with its steady cycles of fullness and absence, became a ruler of time and emotion. Its phases echoed human experience: growth, decline, disappearance, return. In its light, nights felt less empty, less threatening. The sky did not just tell humans when to act. It told them when to pause. When the moon was full, work slowed. When certain stars vanished, preparation began. Rest and labor, hope and caution, all were shaped by movements overhead. Life on Earth slowly synchronized with rhythms beyond human control. And in that synchronization, a quiet humility formed. To live by the sky was to accept that not everything could be rushed or forced. Seeds needed time. Journeys required patience. Even grief followed cycles, much like the moon. Loss felt final, yet the sky whispered otherwise. Everything returned in some form. As generations passed, this silent language became inherited knowledge. Elders taught children where to look, what to notice, which stars mattered most. Stories were used not only to explain, but to remember. A constellation shaped like an animal was easier to recall than a cluster of lights. A myth attached to a season ensured it would not be forgotten. Storytelling became memory's companion. Yet beneath every story, the original observation remained untouched. The sky was consistent, reliable, larger than human affairs. This consistency offered something deeply comforting. In times of disaster, floods, droughts, disease, the stars remained unchanged. Their indifference was not cruelty. It was reassurance. The universe was not reacting to human suffering because it was not built to harm or save. It simply existed. For many, this realization eased fear. If the sky did not collapse during tragedy, perhaps existence itself was resilient. Perhaps life continued not because it was easy, but because it was meant to endure. There is a subtle psychological shift that happens when people begin to see themselves as part of a larger system rather than isolated beings. Responsibility changes. Time stretches. Personal pain, while still real, feels less suffocating. The sky encouraged this shift gently, without instruction. It allowed humans to feel small without feeling meaningless. This balance between insignificance and belonging is delicate. Too much awareness of smallness can lead to despair. Too much belief in importance can lead to arrogance. The night sky held both truths at once. It reminded humans that they were fleeting, yet undeniably present. A brief spark beneath an endless canopy. As civilizations formed and cities rose, the relationship with the sky evolved but never disappeared. Temples were aligned with solstices. Monuments were built to capture light on specific days. Entire belief systems were structured around celestial events. Even when writing replaced oral memory, the stars remained central. Their language had become too deeply woven into human understanding to be abandoned. Yet, no matter how complex interpretations became, the experience itself stayed simple. Looking up, feeling quiet, noticing movement, letting time slow. And perhaps this is why, even now, the night sky still holds power. Even when its mysteries are explained through science, its emotional effect remains unchanged. When modern lights dim and stars reappear, something ancient stirs. The same calm curiosity, the same gentle unease, the same comfort in patterns older than history. The silent language of the night sky was never meant to be fully translated. It was meant to be felt. To remind humanity that while life unfolds in noise and urgency, there exists a wider rhythm, steady, patient, and always present. A rhythm that does not rush. A rhythm that waits. And as the sky continues its slow, endless motion, it carries with it every gaze that has ever lingered too long, every question whispered into darkness, every hope placed quietly among the stars. Before the sky was divided into neat symbols, before lines were drawn between distant lights, before names were spoken with certainty, there was only recognition without structure. The stars existed, but they were not yet organized into meaning. They were simply there, scattered across the darkness like embers frozen in time. Early humans did not immediately see shapes or stories. They saw presence. They saw repetition. And slowly, almost unconsciously, they began to feel familiarity. Familiarity is a powerful force. It turns the unknown into something less threatening, something that can be approached without fear. Night after night, the same lights appeared, some brighter, some faint, some clustered together, others isolated. Over time, the human mind began to group them, not out of intention, but instinct. Just as clouds suggest shapes and shadows resemble faces, the stars invited interpretation. This was not logic at work. It was imagination reaching outward, searching for connection. At this stage, the sky had no hierarchy, no right or wrong interpretation. One person might see an animal where another saw a tool or a path, or nothing at all. Meaning was fluid, personal, and deeply tied to daily life. A hunter might notice stars that resemble prey. A gatherer might see patterns that echoed plants or seasons. The sky reflected what mattered most to those who depended on it. There were no grand myths yet, no gods assigned to constellations. Instead, there were simple associations. This group of stars appears when the weather changes. That cluster disappears when food grows scarce. Observation came before explanation, survival before symbolism, and yet something important was happening beneath the surface. The human mind was learning to map the invisible, to project order onto vastness, to find rhythm where none was obvious. This skill would shape not only astrology, but language, art, and culture itself. The stars were one of the earliest training grounds for abstract thought. As generations passed, these early impressions began to solidify. What one group noticed, the next inherited. Children learned where to look before they understood why it mattered. Knowledge was passed down through gesture and memory rather than instruction. Point here. Wait for this. Remember that. The sky became a shared reference, a silent agreement between people separated by time. Still, the stars remained unnamed. Without names, they retained a certain freedom. They could change meaning without conflict. If a pattern seemed different one season, it was accepted. If a story evolved, no one corrected it. This flexibility allowed the sky to remain alive, responsive to human experience rather than fixed to doctrine. There is something deeply human in this early stage of stargazing. It reveals a mind not yet obsessed with control or certainty, a mind comfortable with suggestion rather than definition. The stars were companions, not authorities. They offered guidance, not commands. But as communities grew larger and memories stretched thinner, the need for consistency increased. Oral traditions required anchors. Stories needed structure to survive repetition. And so, slowly, patterns became standardized, not because they were more accurate, but because they were easier to remember. Shapes were simplified. Associations narrowed. What was once personal became communal. This shift marked a subtle but profound change. The sky began to belong to everyone in the same way. Shared stories replaced individual impressions, and with shared stories came shared expectations. The stars were no longer just observed. They were interpreted. Yet even then, interpretation remained gentle. There was no claim that the sky dictated fate. It reflected tendencies, moments, warnings. The idea that the heavens could influence life was less about control and more about correspondence. As above, so below. The movement of the sky mirrored the movement of human existence. Cycles of growth, decay, rest, and return. At this stage, time itself began to feel different. Days were no longer isolated events. They belonged to seasons. Seasons belonged to cycles. Cycles belonged to something greater, something turning endlessly overhead. This awareness brought comfort. If everything moved in circles, Then endings were not absolute. Loss was followed by renewal. Darkness gave way to light. This belief did not eliminate fear, but it softened it. Death, while still painful, became part of a larger rhythm. The stars, unchanged by individual suffering, suggested continuity beyond the self. To be remembered beneath the same sky as ancestors was a kind of immortality. As the sky grew more familiar, so did the desire to mark it. Early carvings, stone arrangements, and markings began to align with celestial events. These were not observatories in the modern sense, but gestures of attention, proof that someone had noticed, that someone cared enough to remember where light touched stone at certain times of year. In these moments, the boundary between observation and reverence blurred. The sky did not demand worship, yet it inspired it, not out of fear, but gratitude. Gratitude for predictability, for guidance, for the quiet reassurance that something vast and stable existed beyond human chaos. Even then, before the ZODIAC, before astrology as a system, the foundation was being laid. The human relationship with the sky was becoming ritualized, repeated, honored. What began as survival knowledge was transforming into cultural identity. And yet, the simplicity remained. People still lay on their backs and watch the stars drift. They still trace invisible lines without knowing why certain connections felt right. They still felt small, yet strangely held by the darkness. It is important to remember that this phase lasted far longer than the structured systems that followed. For thousands of years, humans lived beneath the stars without trying to own them, without claiming absolute meaning. The sky was a shared mystery, open to interpretation, free from rigid explanation. Perhaps this is why those early stargazers felt such peace. They did not seek to master the universe. They listened to it. They allowed it to exist without demanding answers. In doing so, they found something rare, a sense of belonging that did not require understanding. And as the stars continued their endless movement, unbothered by human curiosity, they quietly shaped the way humanity learned to think, to imagine, to wonder. Long before the zodiac had names, the sky had already begun its work, teaching humans how to look beyond themselves and feel a home in the vast unknown. As human settlements grew more permanent, and nights were spent in the same places again and again, the relationship with the sky began to change in a subtle but important way. The stars were no longer just companions to travelers or markers for survival. They became something to be studied, watched with intention, remembered with care. In the fertile lands between great rivers, where agriculture tied people to seasons more tightly than ever before, the sky took on a new role, one of responsibility. In ancient Mesopotamia, particularly in Babylon, the night sky was treated with a seriousness unlike anything seen before. Here, observation became duty. The heavens were no longer simply admired. They were recorded. Clay tablets were pressed with symbols noting when certain stars rose, when planets wandered, when eclipses darkened the moon. These records were not created out of curiosity alone. They were created because people believed the sky mattered deeply to life below. For the Babylonians, the universe was not random. It was ordered, deliberate, and meaningful. If floods came unexpectedly or kings fell suddenly, the answer was not chaos, it was misalignment. Something in the cosmic rhythm had shifted, and it was humanity's task to notice. The sky was seen as a message-bearing realm, and those trained to read it held immense responsibility. These readers of the sky were priests, scholars, and astrologer-astronomers, though the distinction between those roles did not yet exist. To observe the heavens was both scientific and sacred. Measuring the movement of planets was inseparable from interpreting their significance. Numbers and prayers lived side by side. Calculation and reverence were not opposites. They were partners. Night after night, Babylonian observers climbed temple towers and ziggurats, placing themselves closer to the sky, not physically, but symbolically. From these heights, they watched patiently, often in silence, tracking movements too slow to notice in a single lifetime. Their work required humility. The sky could not be rushed. It revealed itself only to those willing to wait. This patience shaped Babylonian thought. Time was no longer something that merely passed. It was something that unfolded, Events on Earth were believed to echo events in the heavens, not because the stars caused them directly, but because both belonged to the same cosmic order. If the sky followed patterns, so too must history. Rise, fall, return. Nothing existed alone. It was in Babylon that the sky began to be divided with precision. The path of the sun, moon, and wandering planets was carefully mapped. This path, later called the ecliptic, became the backbone of what would eventually become the zodiac. The Babylonians did not invent this system for personality or entertainment. They created it to understand time itself. Dividing the sky into equal sections allowed them to predict seasons more accurately. It also allowed them to notice correlations. Certain celestial events seemed to repeat alongside earthly outcomes. A particular alignment before a successful harvest, another before unrest. These patterns, whether coincidence or interpretation, reinforced the belief that the sky was a guidebook written in light. Yet even with this growing structure, Babylonian astrology remained cautious. Predictions were rarely personal. The focus was collective: cities, kings, crops, and nations. The fate of an individual mattered less than the fate of the whole. When the sky spoke, it spoke about balance, not personal desire. This restraint is important to understand. The Babylonians did not claim mastery over the heavens. They believed misinterpretation was dangerous. Reading the sky incorrectly could bring disaster, not because the stars would punish mistakes, but because misunderstanding the rhythm of time led to poor decisions. Humility remained central. There was also fear woven into this reverence. Eclipses, sudden disappearances of light, or unusual planetary behavior were deeply unsettling. These moments broke the expected order and demanded immediate attention. Rituals were performed not to control the sky, but to restore harmony between realms. The goal was always balance. Through this careful observation, something remarkable emerged. The sky became cyclical, not just in motion, but in meaning. Events were no longer isolated. They belonged to repeating patterns. This idea deeply influenced how Babylonians understood existence. If the heavens repeated themselves, perhaps history did too. Perhaps empires rose and fell not randomly, but according to a cosmic rhythm older than any kingdom. This belief did not make life easier, but it made it comprehensible. In a world where floods could erase years of labor and rulers could be replaced overnight, the idea of order was comforting. Even suffering had a place within a larger cycle. Even loss was part of return. As Babylon's influence spread, so did its celestial knowledge. Later civilizations inherited these divisions of the sky, often without fully understanding their original purpose. What began as timekeeping and omen reading slowly transformed into something more symbolic. But the foundation, the careful watching, the respect for cycles, the belief in correspondence, remained intact. It is worth pausing here, in this moment of history, to notice the quiet beauty of what was happening. Humans were not trying to escape the world by looking at the sky. They were trying to understand how to live within it. The stars were not distant gods demanding worship. They were markers of rhythm, teachers of patience. Even now, thousands of years later, traces of Babylon's sky divisions remain embedded in modern thought, not because their interpretations were perfect, but because their approach was deeply human. Watch, record, reflect, accept that meaning unfold slowly. In Babylon, the sky stopped being just a backdrop. It became a system, a calendar, a mirror of order that humans could align themselves with. And in doing so, they took another step toward the zodiac, not as belief, but as relationship. A quiet agreement between earth and sky, written not in certainty, but in attention. Once the sky had been carefully observed and divided, once its movements were mapped and remembered, something inevitable happened. The heavens began to feel complete. No longer an endless scattering of lights. The sky now carried structure, a sense of wholeness. The idea emerged that time itself moved in a circle, returning again and again to familiar points, much like the stars that rose and set with such unwavering patience. This circular understanding of time was revolutionary. Earlier, life had been experienced mostly in fragments, one season following another, one generation replacing the last. But now, patterns connected these fragments into something larger. The sky suggested that beginnings and endings were not opposites, but partners. Every end carried the seed of return. Every disappearance hinted at reappearance. As the sun traveled its steady path through the heavens over the course of a year, observers noticed that it passed through the same regions of the sky in the same order. These regions became markers, not a place, but time. Each one held a distinct character shaped by the season it accompanied: heat or cold, growth or rest, abundance or scarcity. The sky was no longer static. It was alive with progression. Gradually, these regions were imagined as a wheel, a great circle surrounding the earth, turning endlessly, carrying the sun, moon, and wandering planets along its path. This was not just a diagram. It was a philosophy. To imagine time as a wheel was to accept that nothing stood still, yet nothing was ever truly lost. Everything returned, altered but familiar. This circular sky gave humans something deeply reassuring. If life moved in cycles, then chaos was temporary. Darkness had duration, but not dominance. The longest night would always be followed by light. The coldest season would soften into warmth. Even grief, in time, would loosen its grip. Within this wheel, the sky was divided into equal segments. Each segment marked a phase in the sun's journey, a chapter in the year's story. These divisions were practical, but they also carried symbolic weight. Each section came to represent a particular mood of existence, a way of being that mirrored the natural world at that time. The zodiac, in its earliest form, was not about identity. It was about timing. It answered questions like when to plant, when to rest, when to prepare. It reflected the environment rather than the individual. Yet over time, humans could not resist drawing connections inward. If certain times of year carried certain energies, perhaps those born under them carried echoes of that rhythm. This idea did not emerge suddenly. It unfolded slowly, gently, as people noticed similarities between season and temperament. Those born in harsh winters seemed resilient. Those born in fertile springs seemed adaptable. These observations were not rigid conclusions, but quiet curiosities. The sky invited reflection, not definition. As the zodiacal took shape, it became a bridge between heaven and earth. It suggested that human life was not separate from cosmic movement, but synchronized with it. Birth was no longer a random moment. It was an arrival timed by the turning of the heavens. This belief gave significance to existence itself. Yet, even as symbolism deepened, the zodiac remained rooted in observation. It was not imposed on the sky. It emerged from it. The constellations associated with each segment were chosen not because they demanded attention, but because they were already there, rising and setting in alignment with the sun's path. Myth followed motion, not the other way around. What made the zodiac powerful was its balance between structure and flexibility. The wheel was fixed, but interpretation flowed. Different cultures saw different figures in the same stars. A lion in one land, a dragon in another. The names changed, but the rhythm remained. This allowed the zodiac to travel across borders without losing its essence. As empires rose and fell, the zodiac endured. Its simplicity protected it. A circle divided into 12 parts was easy to remember, easy to teach, easy to adapt. It mirrored the human experience of time, months, seasons, cycles of labor and rest. The sky's structure reflected life's structure. And so, the zodiac became more than a tool. It became a story of continuity, a reminder that no matter how much the world changed, the sky remained faithful to its rhythm. Wars might reshape borders, languages might fade, but the stars would still return to their places. This sense of permanence was deeply comforting in unstable times. When human laws failed, cosmic order remained. When rulers fell, the sun still rose. The zodiac offered a quiet promise that existence followed a rhythm beyond human error. At the same time, the wheel carried a subtle warning. Circles do not progress endlessly upward. They return. What rises will eventually descend. What flourishes will one day rest. This understanding encouraged humility. Power was temporary. Abundance required care. Rest was not weakness, but necessity. The zodiac did not eliminate uncertainty, but it framed it. Life was no longer a straight line into the unknown. It was a path that curved gently back toward itself. Each return brought familiarity, but never repetition. The same, but changed. As this concept spread, it reshaped how people understood themselves. Individuals were no longer isolated points in time. They were moments within a larger turning. Their lives had seasons, just like the year. Periods of growth, challenge, reflection, and renewal. And in this way, the zodiac became deeply human. It did not promise control over fate. It offered companionship through it, a way to feel aligned with something vast and steady. A reminder that even when life feels directionless, the wheel continues to turn, carrying everyone forward together. Under the circular sky, humanity found a new way to exist, not above nature, not beneath it, but within it, moving as the heavens moved, resting when they rested, trusting that even in darkness, the light was already on its way back. When the turning of the zodiac brings the sun to its highest point and then begins its slow descent, something subtle shifts in the atmosphere of the year. The days are still long, the light still strong, yet there's an unspoken awareness that the peak has passed. It is in this quiet turning, this gentle movement away from fullness, that Cancer emerges beneath the moon's watchful glow. Unlike the bold brilliance of the sun, Cancer belongs to softer light, lunar light, the kind that does not command attention, but draws it in slowly. The moon does not blaze across the sky. It drifts, it waxes and wanes, revealing and concealing itself in a rhythm that feels deeply familiar to human emotion. It is no coincidence that Cancer, the first sign after the sun's zenith, became associated with the moon. Where the sun marks outward growth, the moon governs inward tides. In ancient understanding, this time of year was not about expansion, but preservation. Crops had been planted. Growth was underway. Now the task was protection. Watching, waiting, ensuring that what had begun could survive. This shift from action to care shaped the essence of Cancer long before it became a personality archetype. The constellation itself does not dominate the sky. It is faint, easily overlooked, lacking the dramatic brightness of others. Yet this subtlety is part of its meaning. Cancer was never meant to be loud. Its power lies in quiet endurance, in holding rather than conquering, in remaining when others move on. The choice of a crab to represent this sign was not arbitrary. Crabs move sideways, not forward. They carry their homes with them. They survive by retreating as much as advancing. To ancient observers, this creature embodied a truth about life that was often ignored, that progress is not always direct, and strength is not always visible. Under the influence of the moon, Cancer became linked to cycles of memory and emotion. Just as the moon pulls at the oceans, creating tides unseen beneath the surface, Cancer was believed to govern inner movements, feelings that rise and fall without warning, memories that return long after they seem forgotten. This was not seen as weakness. It was seen as depth. In cultures that lived closely with nature, water was sacred. Rivers meant life. Rain meant survival. The sea was both giver and taker. Cancer, as a water sign, carried this duality. It nurtured, but it also protected fiercely. The same waters that sustain can also drown. Care, when threatened, can become defense. This understanding shaped how Cancer was experienced in the zodiac wheel. It marked a turning inward, a time when energy shifted from outward achievement to inner stability. Homes were strengthened, families gathered. Stories were told not for instruction, but for connection. Memory became a form of survival. Even the night sky reflected this mood. With Cancer's faint stars, the darkness feels deeper, quieter. The absence of brightness invites rest rather than attention. It encourages the observer to feel rather than analyze, to sit with emotion rather than resolve it. In mythology, Cancer is often overshadowed by more dramatic tales, yet its story carries profound meaning. It appears not as a hero, but as a participant, not as a conqueror, but as one who fulfills a role without expectation of reward. This humility mirrors the sign's deeper lesson, that not all contributions are celebrated, yet all are necessary. The moon's constant change also taught an important truth through Cancer. Stability does not mean stillness. It means return. Emotions shift. People change. Circumstances evolve. But certain bonds endure, not because they remain unchanged, but because they adapt. For ancient people, This was deeply reassuring. Life was unpredictable. Loss was inevitable. Yet the moon always returned to fullness. The tides always came back. Cancer symbolizes promise, that what withdraws is not gone forever. This connection to home was not limited to physical shelter. Home meant belonging, familiarity, the place, person, or feeling where one could lower defenses. In a harsh world, this was sacred. Cancer represented the invisible structures that made survival meaningful. Care, loyalty, remembrance. As the zodiac progressed, Cancer stood as a threshold, the first sign that asked humans to turn inward, to acknowledge vulnerability without shame, to understand that protection is as vital as ambition, that rest is as necessary as effort. Even today, when life moves faster and nights are filled with artificial light, the symbolism of Cancer still resonates. There are moments when the world feels overwhelming, when retreat feels wiser than advance. In those moments, the ancient energy of Cancer lingers, reminding us that stepping back is not failure. It is preservation. Under the moonlit sky, Cancer whispers rather than declares. It speaks of quiet strength, of holding on, of remembering what matters when the noise fades. It teaches that softness can endure, that care can be powerful, and that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply to stay. In the age when gods were said to walk close to the world of humans, when the boundary between myth and memory was thin, the story of Cancer took shape not as a tale of triumph, but as one of quiet loyalty. It begins not with glory, but with conflict far greater than the creature at its center, a struggle between divine will and human strength, where even the smallest participant will be remembered among the stars. The scene opens with Hercules, the great hero, locked in battle with the Hydra. The monster rose from a dark, poisoned swamp, each severed head replaced by two more. The ground trembled beneath the force of the fight. The air itself seemed to recoil as venom seeped into the earth. This was a contest of endurance, not speed, and even Hercules, favored by the gods, was pushed to his limits. Watching from afar was Hera, queen of the gods, whose resentment toward Hercules burned quietly but fiercely. Hercules was a living reminder of betrayal, a child born from Zeus's infidelity. Every victory he claimed deepened her anger, and so, unable to strike him directly, she sought other ways to weaken him, not through overwhelming force, but through distraction. From the shadows of the swamp, Hera summoned a crab, not a beast of legend, not a monster terror, but a simple creature of the earth and water. Its shell was hard, its movement slow, its strength insignificant compared to the hero it was sent to face. Yet it obeyed. As Hercules battled the Hydra, the crab emerged, crawling across the muddy ground, approaching without roar or warning. It did not attack from above or behind. It moved steadily toward the hero's exposed foot and clamped down with everything it had. In that moment, the crab was not brave or foolish. It was loyal. It fulfilled the role given to it, without question. The result was swift. Hercules barely noticed the pain. With a single motion, he crushed the crab beneath his heel and continued the battle, never realizing that this small act would echo through eternity. The crab's life ended as quietly as it had begun, unnoticed by the hero, insignificant in the outcome of the battle. But the gods noticed. Hera, moved not by the crab's success, but by its devotion, chose to honor it. The creature had not been strong. It had not altered fate, yet it had acted with unwavering loyalty, stepping into a battle far beyond its capacity. In a world ruled by gods and heroes, this mattered, and so the crab was placed among the stars. This act transformed the story of Cancer into something deeply human. It was not about victory. It was about presence, about standing one's ground, even when the odds are impossible, about fulfilling a role without expectation of recognition. The constellation itself reflects this humility. Cancer stars are faint, scattered, easily overlooked. There's no dramatic outline, no striking brightness. One must look carefully to find it, just as one must look closely to notice acts of quiet courage in life. Its placement in the sky is not commanding, but it is enduring. This myth carried a powerful lesson for those who heard it. Strength alone does not determine worth. Even the smallest act, performed with sincerity, can be remembered, In a world where survival often required submission to greater forces, this idea offered comfort. One did not need to be a hero to matter. The crab sideways movement also took on symbolic meaning. It did not charge forward like a lion or soar like an eagle. It approached from an unexpected angle. This became a metaphor for resilience, progress that avoids confrontation, survival through adaptation rather than dominance. For ancient listeners, this story softened the harshness of a world obsessed with power. It suggested that loyalty, care, and persistence held value even when they did not change outcomes. The crab did not win, but it was not forgotten. Cancer's myth also introduced a theme that would echo throughout astrology, the idea that signs represent roles rather than destinies. Cancer was not meant to lead armies or conquer lands. Its role was to protect, to support, to stand firm when others moved forward. In many ways, this myth mirrored daily life. Most people were not heroes. Most lives were not marked by glory. Yet loyalty to family, devotion to community, and quiet endurance kept societies alive. Cancer became a symbol for these unseen foundations. The story also carried a subtle warning. Devotion without discernment can lead to sacrifice without reward. The crab acted out of loyalty, not understanding. This nuance added depth to the sign's meaning. Care must be balanced with self-preservation. Protection should not come at the cost of self-destruction. Yet the god's decision to honor the crab suggests that the universe notices even when outcomes do not. Effort itself carries weight. Presence itself matters. As this myth spread, it shaped how Cancer was understood, not as weakness, but as quiet strength, not as retreat, but as holding ground. The crab shell became a symbol of emotional protection, its vulnerability hidden beneath layers of care. Under the stars, Cancer became a reminder that not all battles are meant to be won, and not all courage is loud. Some courage shows up briefly, does its part, and disappears. But its echo remains. And so, when ancient observers looked up and traced the faint stars of Cancer, they did not see a hero frozen in victory. They saw a small life honored for its loyalty. A reminder that even in the universe of God and giants, there is room for those who simply show up, do their part, and remain true to what they protect. As the story of Cancer traveled beyond the borders of Greece, it softened and reshaped itself, adapting to the cultures that looked up at the same faint stars from different lands. Though the myths changed, the essence remained remarkably consistent. Cancer was never loud or dominating. It was always connected to water, to cycles, to protection, and to the quiet forces that sustain life rather than command it. In ancient Egypt, where the Nile determined the fate of an entire civilization, the symbolism of Cancer found fertile ground. The rising of certain stars near Cancer's place in the sky coincided closely with the annual flooding of the river. This flood was not destruction, but renewal. It brought nutrient-rich silt that made agriculture possible. Without it, the land would harden, crops would fail, and life would wither. To the Egyptians, water was not simply an element. It was the breath of continuity. Cancer's position near the summer solstice aligned with this life-giving inundation. The timing felt deliberate, almost intimate. The heavens seemed to announce a return of abundance, yet with a warning. Too much water could also bring chaos. This dual nature fit Cancer perfectly. It was nurturing but powerful, gentle, yet capable of overwhelming force if disrespected. Rather than a crab, Egyptians often associated this region of the sky with scarabs or protective deities linked to rebirth. The symbolism shifted, but the theme remained unchanged. Life emerges, retreats, and emerges again. What disappears is not lost, only transformed. Cancer became a guardian of thresholds, the moment between safety and vulnerability, between growth and decay. In Mesopotamian traditions, earlier than Greek myth, Cancer was tied to the idea of the gate, a passage through which souls entered the world. Water again played a central role. Rivers marked boundaries between realms, between the living and the dead, the known and the unknown. Cancer's faint stars hovered near the symbolic doorway, suggesting beginnings rather than endings. This association with entry rather than exit shaped Cancer's deeper meaning. It was not about ambition or achievement. It was about arrival, the first breath, the first attachment, the fragile beginnings that require care to survive. in cultures where infant mortality was high and life was uncertain. This symbolism carried immense emotional weight. Across ancient Asia, similar ideas emerged independently. In early Chinese astronomy, the stars corresponding to Cancer were linked to the vermilion bird of the south, a symbol of summer, warmth, and emotional expression. Though the animal differed, the qualities echoed familiar themes: sensitivity, protection, and the balance between inner and outer worlds. In India, where lunar cycles deeply influence spiritual life, Cancer's connection to the moon took on special significance. The moon governed rituals, fasting days, and agricultural timing. It was believed to influence the mind, emotions, and subconscious states. Cancer, ruled by the moon, became associated with memory and inner life rather than external status. It was less about who one appeared to be and more about who one was when no one was watching. What is striking across all these cultures is how consistently Cancer avoided associations with conquest or dominance. While other signs were linked to kings, warriors, or gods of thunder, Cancer remained close to home, close to water, close to the body's rhythms. Menstruation, pregnancy, tides, and sleep cycles all fell under lunar influence, and by extension, Cancer's domain. In tribal societies closer to the ocean, Cancer's symbolism grew even more visceral. Coastal communities understood the sea as both provider and threat. Fishing required trust in cycles, knowing when tide would change, when storms would come, when to return home. Cancer became associated with intuition, the ability to sense danger before it appeared. This was not mystical foresight, but learned sensitivity passed down through generations. To feel the weather shift before clouds formed, to know when waves would turn violent, to recognize subtle changes in water temperature or wind direction. These skills were life-saving, and they required emotional awareness as much as physical observation. Cancer embodied this awareness. In many indigenous traditions, Cancer-like symbolism appeared not as a star sign, but as a seasonal spirit, a time when elders told stories, when communities gathered closer, when resources were protected rather than spent. The emphasis was on preservation, holding what had been gathered, ensuring survival through care and cooperation. Even in Roman adaptations of Greek astrology, where symbols often became more rigid and hierarchical, Cancer retained its gentle nature. It was described as the gateway of men, the place where souls entered the physical world. Capricorn, opposite Cancer, was seen as the gate of gods, where souls returned to the divine. Together, they formed a cosmic breathing pattern. Inhale and exhale, arrival and departure. This framing elevated Cancer beyond personality traits. It placed the sign at the heart of existence itself. To be born under Cancer was not to be emotional or sensitive in a shallow sense. It was to be aligned with beginnings, with attachment, with the vulnerability of life entering form. Across cultures, Cancer was also associated with memory, not history as written record, but lived memory, the kind stored in rituals, songs, and habits. The memory of how things are done, how bread is made, how children are comforted, how grief is shared. These things rarely appear in heroic tales, yet they are what hold societies together. The faintness of Cancer's stars seemed almost intentional in this context. They did not demand attention. They required familiarity. One had to know where to look. Just as the most important emotional bonds in life often go unnoticed until they are threatened or lost. This universality suggests that Cancer did not originate from a single myth or place. It emerged from a shared human experience. Every culture understood the need for shelter, for emotional safety, for water, for cycles of care. Cancer became the sky's quiet reflection of these needs. And perhaps this is why Cancer endures so deeply in human consciousness. It speaks not to what we strive to become, but to what we cannot survive without: connection, memory, protection, the willingness to retreat so that something fragile can endure. When ancient people across the world looked up and saw those dim stars, they did not see weakness. They saw continuity. The reassurance that life does not only advance through force, but through care. That survival is not always loud. That sometimes the most powerful thing a civilization can do is remember how to nurture what it loves. And so, Cancer became more than a sign. It became a shared human truth written softly across the sky. visible only to those who understood that the quiet forces are often the ones that last the longest. As the myth settled and the symbols took root, Cancer began to turn inward. No longer just a constellation or a seasonal marker, it became a reflection of the inner landscape, one that ancient observers sensed long before psychology had words for it. Where other signs spoke through action or ambition, Cancer whispered through feeling, through memory, through the subtle emotional currents that shape human behavior without announcing themselves. To understand Cancer's psychological essence, one must first understand the moon. The moon does not shine with its own light. It reflects. It borrows brilliance from the sun and softens it. This simple fact became a powerful metaphor. Cancer was seen as a reflector of experience. It absorbed what happened around it, held on to it, and released it slowly over time. Emotions were not momentary reactions, but lingering impressions. Ancient people noticed this pattern in themselves. Certain moments stayed long after they passed. A look, a loss, a kindness. These experiences did not fade quickly. They settled into the mind, shaping behavior quietly. Cancer became associated with this depth of emotional memory, the ability to remember not just what happened, but how it felt. This sensitivity was not viewed as fragility. It was awareness. In environments where danger was constant, being emotionally perceptive meant survival. Noticing subtle shifts in tone, body language, or atmosphere could prevent conflict or warn of impending threats. Cancer energy sharpened this awareness. It listened more than it spoke. It watched more than it acted. Yet with this depth came vulnerability. To feel deeply is to risk pain. Cancer's psychological world was shaped by this tension, the desire to connect and the fear of being hurt. This inner conflict led to one of the sign's most enduring symbols, the shell. Protection was not isolation. It was selective openness. Trust was earned slowly, but once given, it was unwavering. This pattern mirrors human attachment itself. Bonds form gradually, through repetition and reliability. Cancer embodied this process. It was less interested in novelty and more drawn to familiarity. What was known felt safe. What was remembered felt real. Change, while inevitable, was approached with caution. Memory played a central role here. Cancer did not forget easily. The past lived close to present, not as regret, but as reference. Previous experiences informed future choices. This gave Cancer a reputation for nostalgia, but in truth, it was continuity, a refusal to discard what had shaped identity. Ancient cultures recognized this as wisdom. Elders were valued not for speed or strength, but for memory. They carried the emotional history of the community, what worked, what failed, what must never be repeated. Cancer mirrored this role. It preserved emotional knowledge so that others could move forward without repeating harm. There was also a strong link between Cancer and the concept of home. Psychologically, home was not just a physical space. It was an emotional environment where one could exist without defense, where vulnerability was allowed, where identity did not need to be proven. Cancer represented this inner refuge. In times of stress, people instinctively sought such refuge. They returned to familiar places, familiar people, familiar routines. This instinct was deeply rooted in survival. Rest restored energy. Safety allowed healing. Cancer energy supported this process by encouraging withdrawal when necessary, not as avoidance, but as restoration. However, the same instinct could become a limitation. Holding too tightly to the familiar could prevent growth. Fear of emotional risk could lead to isolation. Ancient interpretations of Cancer acknowledged the shadow gently. Balance was key. Protection should not become imprisonment. Memory should guide, not trap. The moon cycles offered guidance here. It waxes and wanes. It disappears and returns. Emotional intensity ebbs and flows. Cancer's inner world was meant to move, not stagnate. Periods of retreat were followed by moments of openness. Sensitivity was balanced by resilience. Another psychological aspect associated with Cancer was empathy. To feel deeply was to feel with others. Cancer energy was often described as nurturing, but not in a simplistic sense. True nurturing requires understanding emotional needs that are not spoken. It requires patience, presence, the willingness to sit with discomfort rather than fix it immediately. This ability made Cancer a natural caregiver in ancient societies, not always in visible leadership roles, but as emotional anchors, those who remembered traditions, those who held families together, those who absorbed collective grief so others could continue functioning. Yet this role came at a cost. Carrying emotional weight for others could become overwhelming. Ancient stories often hinted at this burden. Cancer was strong, but its strength was quiet and easily underestimated. Without recognition or rest, emotional exhaustion could set in. This recognition led to rituals designed to support emotional release. Mourning periods, communal gatherings, lunar ceremonies. These practices acknowledged that emotional labor was real labor, that those who held space for others needed care themselves. In this way, Cancer's psychological essence extended beyond individuals into community dynamics. It represented emotional infrastructure, the unseen support systems that allow societies to function. When these systems weaken, everything else becomes unstable. In modern terms, Cancer might be described as emotionally intelligent, but ancient cultures understood it simply as attuned into rhythms others ignored, tuned into undercurrents beneath surface events, tuned into the emotional weather of human life. This attunement was not passive. It required courage. To remain open in a world that could wound was an act of quiet bravery. Cancer's show was not a wall, but a boundary, one that could open and close as needed. Ultimately, Cancer's psychological soul teaches that feeling deeply is not a flaw. It is a form of perception. Memory is not weakness. It is continuity. Retreat is not failure. It is renewal under the moon's gentle light. Cancer reminds us that the inner world matters as much as the outer one, that what is held within shapes everything that follows, and that sometimes the most important journeys are not forward, but inward toward understanding, care, and the quiet strength of emotional truth. After the quiet inward pull of Cancer, the zodiac wheel turns and something unmistakable shifts. The air feels warmer, the days feel fuller, and the world seems to stand a little taller beneath the sky. Where Cancer asks for protection and reflection, the next sign steps forward without hesitation. Leo arrives not as a whisper, but as a steady, confident presence, like the sun itself holding the center of the sky. This transition is not abrupt, but it is clear. The moon's silver light slowly yields to the sun's golden dominance. Shadows shorten. Movement increases. Energy that had been conserved now seeks expression. In the rhythm of the year, this is a time when growth becomes visible. Plants stretch upward. Animals assert territory. Life moves outward. Leo symbolism emerges directly from this moment. It is a sign of midsummer, when the sun reaches its most commanding strength. Ancient observers did not need theology to understand its power. They felt it on their skin. The sun determined survival. Too little meant cold and hunger. Too much meant drought and exhaustion. Balance was everything. The lion, chosen to represent Leo, was not admired merely for strength, but for presence. Lions do not rush. They do not waste energy. They occupy space with certainty. Ancient people saw in the lion a reflection of the sun's nature. Constant, central, impossible to ignore. The lion does not chase validation. It assumes it. In this way, Leo became associated with confidence, not as arrogance, but as self-recognition. To know one's place in the world and stand there without apology. This was not a shallow trait. In early societies, those who lacked self-assurance struggled to lead, protect, or inspire. Leo energy supported visibility and courage. Yet this visibility carried responsibility. To stand in the center was to be seen by all. Mistakes were public. Failures echoed loudly. Leo's strength was not just an action, but an endurance under scrutiny. The sun cannot hide. Neither can the lion. In ancient cultures, the sun was often personified as a ruler or king. Its daily journey across the sky mirrored leadership itself, rising, reigning, and setting with consistency. Leo inherited this symbolism. It became linked to authority, but also to generosity. The sun gives freely. It does not choose who receives its light. This generosity shaped Leo's deeper meaning. True leadership was not domination, but vitality. the ability to warm, encourage, and sustain others. Leo was not meant to overshadow, but to illuminate. When functioning in balance, it inspired growth in everything around it. The fire associated with Leo was not destructive fire, but hearth fire, the kind that gathers people together, the kind that provides warmth and focus. In this sense, Leo represented communal energy, celebration, ritual, storytelling, moments when people gathered not out of necessity, but joy. In contrast to Cancer's private emotional world, Leo's emotional expression was outward. Feelings were shown, not hidden. Pride, joy, anger, love, these were meant to be lived openly. This openness was not recklessness. It was honesty. Emotions, like sunlight, were not meant to be concealed. Ancient festivals often aligned with this period of the year. Music, feasting, and performance flourished. These were not indulgences, but affirmations of life. After months of planting and nurturing, it was time to acknowledge vitality. Leo presided over this affirmation. Yet even in celebration, there was awareness of impermanence. The sun's dominance would not last forever. Midsummer marked both peak and beginning of decline. This awareness added depth to Leo's symbolism. Strength was powerful precisely because it was temporary. This tension between dominance and impermanence gave Leo its psychological complexity. Confidence had to coexist with humility. Pride needed grounding. Without this balance, Leo energy could become brittle, threatened by any challenge to its central position. Ancient myths often explored this danger through stories of kings who forgot their dependence on the people or the gods. The sun, while central, still followed a path it did not choose. Leo, too, was bound by rhythm. True authority came from alignment with that rhythm, not defiance of it. As the zodiac progressed, Leo became the sign that asked a different kind of question than Cancer. Not, how do I protect what I love? But, how do I express who I am? Identity took center stage. Purpose sought voice. Creativity emerged as a form of survival. In early human societies, creative expression was not optional. Songs preserved history. Dances marked seasons. Symbols conveyed meaning where words failed. Leo governed this expressive impulse. It encouraged humans to leave marks, not to dominate, but to be remembered. The sun's light also revealed what darkness concealed. Under Leo's influence, truths surfaced. Conflicts came into the open. Hidden tensions could no longer remain unseen. This made Leo a sign of confrontation, but also resolution. What is seen can be addressed. Despite its brightness, Leo was never meant to exist alone. The sun's purpose is fulfilled only through what it nourishes. Fields, forests, animals, and people respond to its presence. Leo's fulfillment, likewise, comes through relationship, through being seen and allowing others to be seen in return. As the wheel turns fully into Leo's domain, the zodiac breathes outward. The inward care of Cancer transforms into outward confidence. Protection becomes expression. Memory becomes identity. And under the steady gaze of the sun, life stands tall, aware of its strength, even as it senses the quiet truth that no light, however bright, shines forever. In the deep mythic past, when strength was measured not only by victory but by endurance, the story of Leo found its most powerful expression in the tale of the Nemean lion. This was no ordinary beast. Its hide could not be pierced by blade or arrow, and its roar was said to echo through valleys like thunder. It lived near the city of Nemea, where fear settled into daily life, not as sudden terror, but as constant unease. Livestock vanished. Paths were avoided. The presence of the lion reshaped the land itself. When Hercules was sent to confront the creature as part of his labors, the task seemed simple in description, yet impossible in execution. Many had tried to face the lion before and failed. Weapons were useless. Strategy dissolved in the face of brute inevitability. This was not a battle that could be won through cleverness alone. As Hercules approached the hills of Nemea, the sun hung high in the sky, casting harsh light across the terrain. There was nowhere to hide. No shadows deep enough to offer safety. This openness mirrored the nature of the challenge ahead. The lion ruled this land openly, without secrecy or deception. It did not ambush. It dominated. When the two finally met, the clash was immediate and overwhelming. Hercules fired arrows that bounced harmlessly from the lion's hide. His sword dulled and bent. Each failure stripped away another illusion of control. This confrontation demanded something different. Not distance, not tools, but proximity. Forced to abandon weapons, Hercules closed the distance and grappled the lion with his bare hands. This was no elegant fight. It was raw, exhausting, and unforgiving. Breath against breath, muscle against muscle. The heat of the sun pressed down as if bearing witness. In this struggle, strength was not explosive. It was sustained. The lion fought with relentless power, its claws and jaws deadly, its presence overwhelming. Yet Hercules did not retreat. He endured. Slowly, with patience and determination, he found the only vulnerability, the lion's breath. By holding fast, by refusing to let go, he overcame the beast not through force alone, but through persistence. When the lion finally fell, there was no triumphal roar, no celebration, only silence. The land seemed to exhale. Fear loosened its grip. Life could resume. From this moment, the lion's skin became Hercules' armor, a symbol not of conquest, but of integration. He did not discard the beast he defeated. He carried it with him. This act carried deep symbolic meaning. Strength, once confronted, becomes protection. What once threatened now shields. The myth of the Nemean lion shaped Leo's essence profoundly. The lion was not merely an enemy to be slain. It represented an unstoppable force that demanded acknowledgement. It could not be avoided. It could not be outwitted. It had to be faced directly. In astrological symbolism, this became central to Leo's character. Leo does not hide from challenges. It meets them openly. There is courage here, but also vulnerability. To step into the open is to risk exposure. Yet Leo accepts this risk because authenticity requires visibility. The lion also embodied dignity. Even in defeat, it remained majestic. Its power was undeniable. This nuance prevented Leo from becoming a symbol of cruelty or mindless dominance. The lion was feared, but also respected. It ruled not through chaos, but presence. Ancient listeners understood this distinction. True power was not about terrorizing others, but about commanding respect through strength and consistency. Leo inherited this principle. Leadership was not loudness. It was gravity. The myth also revealed a deeper psychological truth. Hercules could not defeat the lion with external tools. He had to rely on his own body, his own endurance. This mirrored an inner battle. Strength, when stripped of external validation, must come from within. Leo, as a sign, carried this lesson forward. Confidence could not be borrowed. It had to be embodied. Titles, possessions, or applause were meaningless without inner stability. The lion's invulnerable hide symbolized a protective layer of self-belief that could not be pierced by doubt. At the same time, the story warned against arrogance. Hercules succeeded not because he underestimated the lion, but because he respected its power. Overconfidence would have led to death. Leo's strength was balanced by humility before real danger. In the aftermath of the battle, the land changed. Fear gave way to order. Paths reopened. Communities regained confidence. This outcome mattered more than the victory itself. The lion's defeat restored balance, not dominance. This restoration reflected Leo's higher purpose. When aligned, Leo energy stabilizes. It provides clarity and direction. It does not exist to overshadow others, but to create a space where life can flourish without fear. As the story traveled through generations, the lion became a cosmic symbol. Placed among the stars, Leo stood as a reminder that true strength is tested, not assumed. That endurance often matters more than brilliance. That facing what terrifies us can transform both ourselves and the world around us. Under the blazing sun, the constellation of Leo shines with confidence, but also with restraint. It does not rush across the sky. It holds its place. Steady, watchful, a symbol not of endless power, but of strength that knows its limits. And so, when ancient eyes traced the shape of the lion above them, they did not see a monster or a hero alone. They saw the meeting point of courage and patience, of exposure and endurance, a quiet reminder that some battles are not won by force, but by the willingness to stand firm until balance returns. As the image of the lion rose higher in the sky, cultures across the ancient world began to associate this region of the heavens with the most powerful force they knew, the sun, not merely as a source of light, but as a presence that governed life itself. Long before written philosophy or formal science, people understood one simple truth. Nothing on earth survived without the sun's favor. Crops followed it. Animals depended on it. Human schedules bent around its rising and setting. And so, wherever Leo appeared, the sun followed closely behind in meaning. In Egypt, this connection became almost inseparable. The sun was not just an object in the sky. It was divine consciousness in motion. Ra, the solar god, traveled across the heavens by day and through the underworld by night, ensuring cosmic balance with every cycle. The lion, standing vigilant at the edge of the desert, became a natural symbol of this power. Lion statues guarded temples, thrones, and sacred pathways, embodying the sun's protective authority. To pass a lion was to pass into a space watched by something eternal. Egyptians noticed that when the sun entered Leo's region of the sky, the Nile soon followed with its annual flood. This timing felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. The floodwaters brought fertility, renewal, and survival to the land. Without them, Egypt would wither. The sun and the lion became partners in this life-giving rhythm, one ruling the sky, the other guarding the threshold between chaos and order. The Sphinx itself, with the body of a lion and the head of a king, faced the rising sun. This was no accident. It symbolized a fusion of human consciousness with solar authority. To rule was not merely to command people, but to align oneself with cosmic order. Leo's energy was not about domination, but stewardship. Kings were expected to shine, to protect, and to sustain. Far to the east, in Mesopotamia, solar symbolism carried similar weight. Shamash, the sun god, was associated with justice and truth. The sun revealed what darkness concealed. Under its light, lies could not survive. Leo inherited this quality. It became associated not just with power, but with clarity. When Leo energy dominated, hidden matters surfaced. What was unjust was exposed. What was authentic stood firm. This association shaped how leadership was understood. A true ruler did not hide in shadows. They ruled in the open. Their actions were visible, their decisions accountable. Leo became the sign of visible authority, where responsibility and exposure walked side by side. In Persia, solar imagery merged with the lion to create enduring symbols of kingship. The lion and sun motif appeared on banners and royal seals, representing strength tempered by illumination. The message was clear. Power without wisdom was dangerous, but wisdom without strength was ineffective. Leo existed at the intersection of both. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks and later the Romans embraced this symbolism fully. Apollo, god of the sun, music, prophecy, and healing, carried Leo's refined fire. He was not a war god, but a civilizing force. His light brought art, knowledge, and balance. Under Apollo's influence, Leo was not just physical strength, but creative brilliance. This creative aspect became increasingly important. The sun did more than sustain life. It inspired it. Under bright skies, humans gathered, celebrated, and expressed themselves. Theater, music, and athletic games flourished during summer months. Leo became associated with performance, not as vanity, but as shared experience. To be seen was to participate in life fully. The Roman emperors, keenly aware of symbolism, aligned themselves with solar imagery to legitimize rule. Coins bore radiant crowns. Public ceremonies were held under open skies. The sun's authority was borrowed to reinforce earthly power. Leo, in this context, represented continuity between heaven and empire. Yet even as solar symbolism reinforced hierarchy, it also carried a moral expectation. The sun gives equally to all. It does not choose favorites. This principle shaped ideals of just leadership. A ruler, like the sun, was meant to nourish the entire realm, not only the elite. When leaders failed to do so, they were seen as out of alignment with cosmic order. In ancient India, solar energy was associated with Surya, the sun god, who represented vitality, health, and the soul's illumination. Leo's fiery nature resonated with this idea of inner radiance. To shine outward, one had to be lit within. Strength was spiritual as well as physical. This idea traveled quietly through philosophies that saw the sun as a symbol of consciousness itself. Just as the sun illuminates the physical world, awareness illuminates the inner one. Leo, ruled by the sun, became associated with self-awareness, knowing who one is, standing in that knowledge without apology. In this sense, Leo's fire was never meant to burn others. It was meant to sustain identity, to provide warmth without consuming. When balanced, Leo energy inspired confidence in others, encouraging them to find their own light rather than compete for attention. The contrast with Cancer here is important. Cancer protects the inner world. Leo expresses it. Cancer gathers. Leo radiates. One preserves life. The other celebrates it. Together, they form a complete cycle of care and expression. As solar worship gradually gave way to monotheistic religions and later scientific understanding, Leo's symbolism did not disappear. It transformed. The sun was no longer worshipped as a god, but remained a symbol of truth, life, and authority. Leo carried these meanings forward, adapting to new worldviews without losing its essence. Even in modern psychology, the sun's symbolism persists. Light represents awareness. Warmth represents connection. Visibility represents validation. Leo's archetype aligns closely with the human need to be seen and recognized, not for ego alone, but for belonging. Ancient cultures understood something that remains true today. Being seen affirms existence. To live entirely unseen is to feel unreal. Leo addressed this need by encouraging expression, creativity, and presence. It validated individuality within the collective. Yet ancient teachings also warned of imbalance. When the sun scorches instead of warms, life suffers. When Leo energy becomes excessive, it can overwhelm rather than inspire. Pride can replace confidence. Control can replace leadership. The sun's gift becomes a burden. This duality was often expressed through myth, stories of kings who believed themselves divine, only to fall when they forgot their humanity. These tales were not condemnations of power, but reminders of responsibility. To shine was to serve. As Leo traveled through centuries and cultures, its solar identity remained intact. Whether carved in stone, sung in hymns, or traced in the stars, the lion and the sun stood together as symbols of life at its most visible. Not hidden, not subtle, but alive, radiant, and accountable. Under Leo's sky, humanity learned not just how to survive, but how to stand tall, how to express joy openly, how to lead with warmth rather than fear, and how to remember that even the brightest light must follow a path, rise and set, and make space for the next turning of the wheel. Beneath the brilliance of solar myths and royal symbolism, Leo's true world unfolds quietly within the human heart. Beyond the image of crowns and lions, there exists a deeply human psychological landscape, one shaped not just by confidence, but by the longing to be seen, valued, and understood. This inner world gives Leo its warmth, but also its most fragile edges. At its core, Leo energy is driven by identity, not the shallow identity of labels or roles, but the deeper question of who one is when stripped of expectation. Ancient cultures may not have used modern psychological language, but they understood this instinctively. To know oneself was considered a form of power. To live without that knowledge was to drift. Leo's connection to the sun makes this clear. The sun does not ask permission to shine. It exists in full presence. Psychologically, Leo seeks the same sense of alignment. When inner values and outer actions match, Leo feels alive. When they do not, discomfort arises, not because of ego, but because authenticity has been compromised. This drive for authenticity explains Leo's strong emotional responses. Joy is expansive. Pride feels natural. Love is expressive. When Leo feels appreciated, the energy flows freely. Creativity blossoms. Generosity increases. The inner fire warms everything it touches. But when recognition is withheld or dismissed, the same fire can flicker uneasily. Doubt enters. The fear is not simply of being ignored, but of being unseen for who one truly is. This distinction is important. Leo does not crave attention for its own sake. It craves acknowledgement of essence. Ancient stories hinted at this vulnerability through tales of fallen kings or wounded heroes. Strength alone was never enough. Without affirmation, even the strongest figures became brittle. Leo psychology includes this delicate balance, confidence supported by connection. Another key aspect of Leo's inner world is loyalty. Once Leo gives its heart, it gives it fully. Relationships are not casual. Bonds are formed through shared experience and mutual recognition. Betrayal, therefore, cuts deeply. It is not merely a breach of trust, but a wound to identity. This loyalty extends beyond people to ideals and values. Leo commits to what it believes in. Abandoning a principle feels like self-betrayal. This explains both Leo's inspiring consistency and its occasional rigidity. Change is possible, but it must align with inner truth. Emotionally, Leo operates best in environments where expression is encouraged. Silence or emotional suppression can feel suffocating. In ancient communal settings, Leo energy thrived through storytelling, ritual, performance, and leadership roles that allowed voice and presence. Without these outlets, frustration built quietly. Creativity plays a central role here. For Leo, creativity is not optional. It is a psychological necessity. Whether through art, speech, problem-solving, or leadership, Leo needs to externalize inner fire. This process affirms existence. It says, I am here and this is me. When creativity is blocked, Leo's energy turns inward. This can manifest as self-doubt, defensiveness, or exaggerated displays meant to reclaim attention. Ancient observers understood this pattern intuitively. They saw that those denied a voice would find one elsewhere, sometimes destructively. There is also a protective aspect to Leo psychology that often goes unnoticed. While outwardly confident, Leo is deeply affected by those it loves. Criticism from trusted sources wounds more than public opposition. The lion may withstand many blows, but the heart beneath the mane remains sensitive. This sensitivity explains Leo's instinct to control its environment at times. It is not about dominance, but safety. Predictable surroundings reduce emotional risk. When Leo feels secure, generosity flows naturally. When insecurity arises, defenses appear. In leadership roles, this dynamic becomes especially important. Leo leaders thrive when respected and supported. They inspire through vision and warmth. However, when undermined or isolated, they may struggle with self-doubt or overcompensation. Ancient teachings often emphasize the need for wise advisors around kings, not to diminish power, but to sustain it. Another psychological layer of Leo involves playfulness. The lion cub at play represents curiosity, joy, and learning through experience. Leo energy retains this childlike quality throughout life. Laughter, games, and celebration are not frivolous. They are essential. They reconnect Leo to its core vitality. This playful aspect also softens Leo's intensity. It reminds a sign not to take itself too seriously. In ancient festivals, moments of humor and excess balance the gravity of leadership. These rituals acknowledge that joy was as sacred as duty, yet play requires safety. Leo's willingness to be playful depends on trust. In hostile environments, play disappears. The lion becomes watchful. This shift can happen subtly, but its effects are profound. Without joy, Leo's fire burns less brightly. The shadow side of Leo psychology emerges when the need for recognition becomes distorted. When identity is built solely on external validation, inner stability weakens. Praise becomes addictive. Criticism becomes devastating. Ancient myths often warn against this imbalance through stories of pride leading to downfall. However, these stories were not condemnations of pride itself. They were cautionary tales about forgetting connection. Leo's healthiest expression emerges when self-worth is rooted internally and shared externally. Confidence becomes contagious rather than competitive. It is also important to recognize Leo's capacity for forgiveness. When hurt, Leo may react strongly at first, but genuine remorse and recognition can heal wounds quickly. What Leo seeks is acknowledgement, not punishment. When seen and valued, the heart opens again. At its highest expression, Leo psychology becomes profoundly generous. It lifts others into visibility. It celebrates success without jealousy. It leads not by command, but by example. This version of Leo understands that light is not diminished by being shared. Ancient cultures understood this ideal through solar metaphors. The sun does not lose strength by shining on many. In fact, its purpose is fulfilled through distribution. Leo's inner world reaches peace when aligns with this truth. In moments of rest, Leo's psychology softens further. Away from performance and responsibility, there is a deep longing for simple connection, companionship, shared silence, being loved without expectation. These moments replenish the inner fire. Ultimately, Leo's psychological world teaches a timeless lesson. To be strong is not to be unfeeling. To be visible is not to be invulnerable. And to lead is not to stand above others, but to stand fully within oneself, offering warmth, courage, and authenticity to those who gather nearby. As the brilliance of Leo's fire begins to soften, the year exhales. The sun still shines, but its intensity eases, no longer demanding attention with the same force. Shadows lengthen almost imperceptibly. The air carries a quieter weight. Something in the natural world shifts from celebration to consideration. It is here, in this gentle transition, that Virgo emerges, not with spectacle, but with intention. Where Leo stood tall beneath the sun, Virgo bends slightly toward the earth. The gaze lowers from the sky to the ground, from expression to application. The season changes its question. No longer who am I, but what must be done? Not in a harsh or joyless way, but with calm acceptance. Life, having grown and flourished, now requires care, refinement, and attention to detail. Ancient observers felt this shift deeply. The harvest season approached, carrying both relief and responsibility. Crops did not gather themselves. Fields required patience, timing, and precision. A single careless action could ruin months of effort. Virgo's energy was born from this awareness that abundance is fragile and survival depends on mindful stewardship. Unlike the dramatic animals of earlier signs, Virgo's symbolism often appeared as a maiden, a figure holding grain or tools rather than weapons. This image was not about purity in a moral sense, but clarity, focus, dedication. The maiden represented attentiveness to life's practical rhythms. She stood at the threshold between growth and decline, ensuring that nothing essential was wasted. This transition from fire to earth marked a profound psychological shift. Leo's warmth encouraged expression and confidence. Virgo asked for discernment. Where Leo said yes to life's fullness, Virgo asked how to sustain it. The energy became quieter, more internal, yet deeply purposeful. In the sky, Virgo is vast, stretching across a large portion of the heavens, yet its stars are not overwhelmingly bright. Like Cancer, it does not demand immediate recognition. One must look carefully to trace its form. This subtlety mirrors Virgo's nature. Its power lies not in visibility, but in effectiveness. Ancient cultures understood that survival after abundance required humility. Overconfidence after a good harvest could lead to disaster. Storage had to be managed, tools repaired, illness treated, waste avoided. Virgo governed these essential acts of maintenance that ensure continuity when celebration ended. Emotionally, this period encouraged introspection of a different kind than Cancer's. Cancer turned inward to protect feelings. Virgo turned inward to refine them. Self-examination became a tool, not for judgment, but for improvement. What worked? What didn't? What could be done better next time? This mindset shaped Virgo's psychological archetype. It became associated with careful thought, analysis, and a desire for order, not for control's sake, but for harmony. Disorder threatened survival. Cleanliness reduced disease. Organization preserved resources. Virgo's attention to detail was a form of care. In myth, Virgo was often linked to goddesses of harvest, justice, and balance. Figures like Demeter, Astrea, or Persephone carried aspects of Virgo's essence. They were not warriors or rulers, but keepers of cycles. Their power lay in timing, knowing when to act and when to wait. The image of the harvest maiden also carried an emotional undertone. Harvest is bittersweet. It is a reward for effort, but it marks the beginning of decline. Fields once green are stripped bare. Plants die so that people may live. Virgo's emergence acknowledged this truth without fear. Endings were not failures. They were part of the process. This acceptance shaped Virgo's relationship with imperfection. While often associated with high standards, ancient Virgo symbolism recognized that perfection was not the goal. Function was. A tool did not need to be beautiful, only effective. A system did not need to impress, only endure. Virgo's earthiness grounded the zodiac after Leo's intensity. It brought attention back to body, health, digestion, daily routines. In ancient times, this was when illness often surfaced after the exertions of summer. Virgo energy emphasized care of the physical self as a sacred duty. This focus on health extended beyond the individual. Community well-being mattered. Clean water, safe storage, shared labor, these were Virgo concerns. The sign became associated with service, not as subservience, but as contribution. Each person had a role. Each task mattered. There was also humility in this service. Virgo did not seek applause. The reward was continuity. The satisfaction of knowing that tomorrow would be possible because of today's careful effort. This mindset contrasted sharply with Leo's need for recognition, yet both were necessary. One ignited life. The other preserved it. The transition between these signs was not abrupt. Leo's warmth still lingered, just as Virgo's discipline had not yet fully settled. This overlap created balance. Joy informed work. Pride softened into responsibility. Expression matured into purpose. Ancient calendars often marked this period with rituals of thanks rather than celebration. Gratitude replaced excitement. Reflection replaced performance. People acknowledged not just what had grown, but what had been learned. Mistakes were noted quietly. Adjustments planned. Virgo's emergence also brought a heightened awareness of time. With winter approaching, there was little room for error. Procrastination became dangerous. Virgo's careful nature reflected this urgency without panic. Calm focus replaced urgency-driven chaos. In personal terms, this energy invited individuals to examine their lives honestly. Where had effort been wasted? Where could care be improved? This was not a season of harsh self-criticism, but of gentle correction. The goal was alignment, not punishment. The maiden symbolism also carried an inner meaning. Virgo represented the untouched potential within experience, the part of the self not yet compromised by ego or fear. It suggested that clarity was always available beneath complexity. One only had to look closely. This clarity extended to perception. Virgo saw patterns others missed. It noticed small inconsistencies that hinted at larger issues. In ancient societies, such awareness was invaluable. A minor change in grain quality could predict famine. A subtle shift in animal behavior could signal disease. Thus, Virgo became the guardian of foresight through attention, not prophecy, but preparedness. It did not foresee the future through visions, but through observation. This grounded wisdom balanced the intuitive and expressive energies that came before. As the zodiac will turn fully into Virgo's domain, the atmosphere grew quieter but not dull. There was satisfaction in work done well, peace in routines that supported life, beauty in simplicity. The earth itself seemed to approve, offering its fruits to those who handled them with respect. Virgo's arrival reminded humanity that survival is not sustained by passion alone. It requires care, patience, precision, and in that care, there is a different kind of grace. A grace found not in shining brightly, but in holding things together when the light begins to soften. This sign did not ask for devotion. It asked for attention. And in giving attention to the smallest details of life, Virgo revealed a profound truth. That meaning often lives not in grand moments, but in the quiet, repeated acts that allow everything else to continue. Long before Virgo became a symbol of analysis or careful thought, it lived in the stories of goddesses who walked between worlds. These figures were not distant or dramatic in the way of thunder gods or warrior heroes. They were quieter, closer to the rhythms of earth and time, and their power lay not in conquest, but in balance. Through them, Virgo's mythological essence took shape as something subtle, enduring, and deeply necessary. One of the earliest and most enduring images associated with Virgo is that of the harvest goddess. In Greek tradition, this role was shared between Demeter and her daughter Persephone, two figures whose story explained not just the seasons, but the emotional reality of loss and return. Demeter, goddess of grain and fertility, represented nourishment and care. Persephone, taken into the underworld and later returned, embodied the cycle of disappearance and reemergence. This myth was not simply about crops. It was about acceptance. Demeter's grief when Persephone vanished mirrored the barrenness of the land. Her relief at her daughter's return restored fertility. Virgo's presence in this story was not dramatic, but foundational. It lived in the tending of fields, in the patience required to wait through loss, and in the discipline of continuing one's duties, even when the heart was heavy. Virgo's forgotten goddess was not a single figure, but an archetype that appeared across cultures, the keeper of order during transition. In Greek thought, this archetype also appeared as Astrea, the virgin goddess of justice and purity. Unlike later moral interpretations, Astrea's purity was not about innocence, but incorruption. She represented fairness untouched by power or desire. As humanity grew more chaotic, Astrea was said to retreat from the world, ascending into the sky to become the constellation Virgo. This story carried a quiet warning. When balance is ignored, when care is abandoned, order withdraws. Virgo's placement in the heavens became a reminder of what was lost and what could be restored through attention and responsibility. In Roman tradition, Virgo was often linked to Ceres, the Roman counterpart of Demeter. Ceres governed agriculture, nourishment, and maternal care. Festivals in her honor focused not on spectacle, but on gratitude. Offerings were simple. Rituals emphasized continuity rather than excess. Virgo's energy aligned perfectly with this approach. Sustenance mattered more than display. Beyond Greece and Rome, similar figures emerged independently. In Mesopotamia, goddesses associated with fertility and order oversaw both the growth of crops and the administration of justice. These roles were not separate. A fair society, like a healthy field, required maintenance. Neglect led to decay. Virgo's mythological role bridged natural and social order seamlessly. In Egypt, Virgo-like symbolism appeared in the figure of Isis, not directly as Virgo, but as a goddess of healing, protection, and restoration. Isis gathered the scattered pieces of Osiris, reassembling him through patience and devotion. This act of restoration mirrored Virgo's core principle. What is broken can be repaired through care, not force. Isis was also associated with knowledge, practical, applied knowledge rather than abstract power. She knew how to heal, how to protect, how to sustain life through difficult transitions. Virgo inherited this wisdom. It was not about knowing everything, but knowing what mattered. In many ancient traditions, these goddesses were closely tied to the land itself. They were seasonal, cyclical, and responsive. When respected, they provided abundance. When ignored, they withdrew. This conditional generosity reinforced Virgo's lesson. Harmony must be maintained. It does not sustain itself automatically. The virgin imagery associated with Virgo has often been misunderstood in later eras. In ancient symbolism, virginity did not imply sexual purity, but autonomy. The maiden was whole unto herself, not defined by possession or dependency. Virgo's goddess did not belong to anyone. She belonged to her role. This autonomy was essential. To tend the harvest, to maintain justice, to heal the sick. These tasks required clarity unclouded by ambition or ego. Virgo's goddess was devoted not to self-glory, but to function. Her satisfaction came from balance restored and systems maintained. Another overlooked aspect of Virgo's mythological figure is her relationship with time. Unlike gods of sudden change, Virgo's goddess works slowly. Seeds do not rush. Healing takes patience. Justice unfolds through careful consideration. This slowness was not weakness. It was precision. Ancient cultures revered this patience because they depended on it. A rushed harvest ruined crops. A hasty judgment destabilized communities. Virgo's goddess taught restraint. She reminded humanity that urgency often creates the very problems it seeks to solve. This goddess was also deeply connected to the idea of service. Not service as submission, but as contribution. Every act of care, cleaning, sorting, repairing, was sacred because it supported life. Virgo's myth elevated these acts, placing them alongside rituals and prayers. In doing so, Virgo challenged a hierarchy of value. Not all important work is visible. Not all power announces itself. The goddess of Virgo worked behind the scenes, ensuring that systems function quietly. When she was present, things simply worked. When she withdrew, disorder became obvious. This invisibility is perhaps why Virgo's goddess faded from popular myth more quickly than others. She did not demand worship. She did not threaten punishment. Her absence was a lesson. When care disappears, life becomes fragile. Even in myths where Virgo's goddess retreats to the heavens, the message is not abandonment, but invitation. Order can return to humanity chooses attention over neglect, balance over excess, care over conquest. This theme resonates deeply with the transition Virgo represents in the zodiac. After the expressive blaze of Leo, Virgo's goddess arrives to gather what remains, to sort what was created, to preserve what is worth carrying forward. She is the quiet figure at the edge of the field, hands full of grain, eyes attentive. She does not celebrate loudly. She assesses. She prepares. She ensures that what has been grown can sustain life beyond the moment. In this way, Virgo's forgotten goddess is not truly forgotten. She lives in every act of care that goes unnoticed, in every system that works because someone paid attention, in every healing that occurred slowly, without applause. Her story reminds us that survival is not heroic. It is patient, it is repetitive, it is grounded, and it is sacred. As Virgo rises in the sky, this ancient goddess returns, not to demand reverence, but to offer guidance. Look closely, tend carefully. Do not waste what has been given. In these simple acts, the quiet wisdom of Virgo continues to shape the world, just as it always has. As the symbolism of Virgo settled into daily life, it moved away from temples and myths and entered kitchens, fields, workshops, and infirmaries. This was where Virgo truly lived, not in grand stories, but in repeated actions, in the steady rhythm of work done carefully, often without recognition. Ancient societies may have honored God in festivals, but they survived through Virgo's quiet influence in everyday routines. In agricultural communities, Virgo's presence was felt most strongly during the harvest. This was not a time for celebration alone, but for precision. Crops had to be gathered at the right moment, not too early, not too late. Grain needed to be dried properly. Storage had to be protected from moisture and pests. One small mistake could mean hunger months later. Virgo's energy governed this delicate balance between abundance and loss. Farmers understood that nature rewarded attention. Those who watched their fields closely noticed subtle signs, changes in leaf color, soil texture, the behavior of insects. These details guided decisions more reliably than force or speed. Virgo became associated with this kind of observation-based wisdom, knowledge earned through patience rather than dominance. Beyond farming, Virgo shaped how tools were made and maintained. Ancient craftspeople relied on accuracy. A poorly shaped blade dulled quickly. A misaligned will broke under stress. Virgo's influence emphasized refinement, the idea that improvement came not from grand redesigns, but from small corrections made consistently. In this way, Virgo became linked to craftsmanship itself, the pride of work done well, even when unseen. Artisans understood that their creations carried their attention within them. A carefully built object lasted longer, functioned better, and served others more reliably. Virgo's satisfaction came not from praise, but from effectiveness. Medicine, too, fell under Virgo's domain. In ancient times, healing was not only spiritual, it was practical. Herbalists observed which plants eased pain, reduced fever, or stopped bleeding. These observations were recorded, tested, and refined over generations. Virgo's careful nature supported this accumulation of applied knowledge. Healers paid attention to symptoms others dismissed. A change in appetite, a subtle fever, a shift in mood. Virgo's influence encouraged listening, to the body, to patterns, to what repeated itself. Healing was not dramatic. It was gradual, methodical, and deeply attentive. This approach extended into hygiene and public health. Clean water, proper waste disposal, and organized living spaces reduced disease long before microbes were understood. Societies that valued order and cleanliness survived longer. Virgo's energy supported these habits, reinforcing the idea that prevention mattered as much as cure. In domestic life, Virgo appeared through routines that sustained households. Food preparation, cleaning, mending clothes, caring for children and elders. These tasks form the backbone of survival. Though often overlooked in historical records, they determined whether families endured hardship. Virgo's association with service did not imply hierarchy. It implied responsibility. Each role mattered. Each task supported the whole. When one person neglected their duties, others suffered. This interconnectedness fostered a quiet respect for reliability. In governance, Virgo's influence appeared through administration. Record-keeping, taxation systems, census counts, and legal procedures all required accuracy. While kings and leaders made decisions, Virgo ensured those decisions were implemented effectively. Without order, authority collapsed into chaos. Scribes, accountants, and planners embodied Virgo's archetype. Their work lacked glamour, yet civilizations depended on it. Errors in records led to disputes. Poor planning led to shortages. Virgo's attention to detail preserved stability. Education, too, reflected Virgo's principles. Knowledge was passed down through repetition and practice. Memorization, correction, and refinement were essential. Students learned not just facts, but discipline. Learning was a process, not an event. In spiritual life, Virgo encouraged humility. Rituals emphasized preparation, cleansing before prayer, precision in offerings. These acts were not about perfectionism, but respect. Attention signaled care. Care created alignment. Virgo's influence also shaped time management. Days were structured around tasks rather than impulses. Work followed the sun. Rest followed exhaustion. Balance emerged through routine. This rhythm reduced anxiety and conserved energy. Emotionally, this structure offered security. Knowing what came next eased uncertainty. Virgo's routines became emotional anchors. In a world full of unpredictability, predictable habits provided comfort. Yet ancient cultures also recognized the danger of imbalance. Too much focus on work led to exhaustion. Excessive scrutiny bred dissatisfaction. Virgo's shadow appeared when care became criticism, when improvement became obsession. To counter this, communities built in periods of rest. Harvest festivals, communal meals, and seasonal pauses reminded people to step back. Virgo's discipline needed balance from joy and connection. Virgo's relationship with nature also fostered environmental awareness. Overharvesting depleted land. Neglecting soil led to erosion. Virgo's principle of sustainability encouraged moderation. Take what is needed. Preserve what remains. In times of crisis, famine, illness, or disaster, Virgo's strength became especially visible. Emergency planning, rationing, and coordinated response required clear thinking. Panic worsened situations. Careful action saved lives. Even in conflict, Virgo's influence persisted. Logistics determined outcomes more than bravery alone. Supplying troops, maintaining equipment, and managing resources required precision. Those who ignored these details failed regardless of courage. What makes Virgo unique in daily life is its quiet omnipresence. It does not announce itself. It works in the background. When everything functions smoothly, Virgo is present. When systems break down, its absence is felt immediately. Ancient wisdom understood this deeply. The most important forces are often invisible. Gravity is unseen, yet it holds everything in place. Virgo operates similarly. It supports life through consistency rather than spectacle. This understanding shaped values around humility. Boasting was discouraged. Reliability was praised. The person who showed up every day mattered more than the one who appeared occasionally with grand gestures. Virgo also influenced how mistakes were viewed. Errors were opportunities for adjustment, not shame. Correcting course was part of the process. This mindset encouraged learning rather than fear. Over time, these principles became cultural norms. Societies that embraced Virgo's values thrived through resilience. Those that ignored them struggled with instability. Even today, echoes of this ancient influence remain. Modern systems, healthcare, engineering, education, logistics, still depend on Virgo's archetype. Attention to detail saves lives. Organization enables progress. Virgo's role in ancient daily life reminds us that history is not only shaped by heroes and rulers. It is shaped by those who maintain, repair, and refine. those who care for what already exists. As the zodiac continues its turn, Virgo stands as a quiet testament to the power of consistency, to the strength found in patience, to the beauty of work done well, even when no one is watching. In honoring Virgo, ancient cultures honored survival itself, not as a dramatic triumph, but as a steady commitment to care, a reminder that life endures not through moments of glory alone, but through countless small acts of attention, repeated day after day, generation after generation. As Virgo's influence moves from the outer world of fields and tools into the inner world of the mind, its quiet complexity becomes fully visible. This is where Virgo truly lives, not in perfection, but in thought, in the gentle, persistent process of noticing, adjusting, and trying again. Virgo's inner world is not loud or dramatic. It hums softly with analysis, concern, care, and almost constant desire to improve what exists. At the center of Virgo psychology is awareness, a heightened sensitivity to patterns, inconsistencies, and subtle shifts that others often overlook. This awareness is not accidental. It evolved from necessity. In ancient life, survival depended on noticing what was slightly off, the grain that smelled wrong, the wound that healed too slowly, the animal that behaved differently. Virgo's mind learned to scan reality for details, not out of fear, but out of responsibility. This constant awareness creates both Virgo's greatest strength and its greatest burden. To see so much means to carry more. Where other signs may move quickly past discomfort, Virgo pauses. It asks questions. It replays moments. It wonders what could have been done differently. This is not self-punishment by nature. It is problem-solving turned inward. Virgo does not seek perfection because it believes perfection is achievable. It seeks improvement because stagnation feels dangerous. To stop refining is to risk decline. This mindset is deeply rooted in ancient experience. Crops left unattended spoiled. Tools left unmaintained failed. Illness ignored worsened. Virgo's psyche internalized this logic and applied it to the self. As a result, Virgo often experiences a quiet tension between acceptance and correction. There is a deep desire to be useful, to contribute meaningfully, to leave things better than they were found. When this desire is fulfilled, Virgo feels calm, grounded, and satisfied. There is peace and usefulness in being part of a system that works. But when Virgo feels ineffective or unnecessary, the mind turns restless. Thoughts begin to circle. Doubt creeps in. Questions multiply. Was that enough? Was it done correctly? Could it have been better? This internal dialogue is not meant to be cruel, yet it can become exhausting if unchecked. One of Virgo's most misunderstood traits is anxiety. In truth, Virgo does not worry without reason. Its concern is rooted in foresight. The mind moves ahead, imagining consequences, anticipating problems before they arise. This can prevent disaster, but it can also prevent rest. Ancient cultures recognized this tension and built structures to support it. Rituals, routines, and rules help contain Virgo's mental energy. Knowing what was expected reduced uncertainty. Order created mental quiet. Virgo thrived in environments where effort led to predictable outcomes. Emotionally, Virgo is reserved but not cold. Feelings run deep, yet they are processed internally before being expressed. Virgo prefers to understand emotions before sharing them. This can appear distant, but it is actually cautious care. Emotions are treated as delicate systems that require understanding before action. This inward processing makes Virgo an excellent listener. While others speak to be heard, Virgo listens to comprehend. It notices inconsistencies between words and tone. It senses when something is unsaid. This sensitivity allows Virgo to offer practical support that truly helps rather than empty reassurance. However, Virgo often struggles to extend the same gentleness to itself that it offers others. Self-criticism arises easily. Standards applied inward are often higher than those applied outward. This imbalance can lead to chronic dissatisfaction, even when external life appears stable. The root of this self-criticism lies in Virgo's relationship with responsibility. Virgo feels responsible not only for actions, but for outcomes. If something goes wrong, the instinct is to ask, "What did I miss?" This sense of accountability is admirable, but heavy. Ancient wisdom warned against carrying responsibility alone. Communities shared labor and decision-making to prevent burnout. When Virgo energy becomes isolated, its inner world can become rigid, overly self-reliant, and quietly overwhelmed. Virgo's mind also has a deep relationship with time. It is future-oriented, constantly preparing. This makes Virgo dependable, but it can pull attention away from the present. Rest feels unproductive. Stillness feels wasteful. And yet, without rest, the mind becomes brittle. Sleep, solitude, and quiet routines are essential for Virgo's mental health. These moments allow thoughts to settle, patterns to integrate, and the nervous system to reset. Without them, the mind continues scanning endlessly, unable to turn itself off. There is also a spiritual dimension to Virgo's inner world that is often overlooked. Virgo seeks meaning through alignment. When actions align with values, when effort serves something larger than the self, Virgo feels fulfilled. This is why service-oriented paths feel natural. Contribution quiets the mind. In ancient times, this alignment was found through ritual and duty. Today, it may be found through work, caregiving, or creative problem-solving. The form changes, but the need remains. Virgo requires a sense of purpose that is tangible and grounded. Another important aspect of Virgo psychology is humility. Virgo does not seek to dominate or impress. It prefers competence over attention. This humility is genuine, but it can lead to invisibility. When contributions go unnoticed, Virgo may retreat further, reinforcing a cycle of quiet effort and quiet disappointment. Learning to receive recognition is a growth point for Virgo, not because praise defines worth, but because acknowledgement restores balance. Giving endlessly without receiving creates depletion. Ancient cultures balanced this through communal gratitude. Work was shared. Effort was recognized collectively. Virgo's relationship with control is subtle. It does not crave power, but predictability. Control is a way to reduce anxiety, not to assert dominance. When life feels chaotic, Virgo tightens routines. When life feels stable, Virgo relaxes. This adaptability is a strength, but it requires self-awareness. Without it, Virgo may cling to control long after it is necessary. Letting go feels risky. Trust must be learned gradually. At its healthiest, Virgo's inner world is peaceful, focused, and compassionate. Thoughts are clear. Effort is purposeful. The mind becomes a tool rather than a burden. In this state, Virgo offers profound support to others, not through grand gestures, but through reliability and wisdom. At its most strained, Virgo's mind becomes crowded with shoulds. Should be better. Should have known. Should do more. These thoughts are signals, not truths. They indicate exhaustion, not failure. Ancient teachings address this by reminding caretakers to care for themselves. Fields needed fallow periods. Tools needed rest. Bodies needed sleep. The same applied to the mind. Virgo's wisdom included knowing when to stop. Virgo's inner journey is one of balance, between effort and acceptance, between responsibility and release. As the stories of Cancer, Leo, and Virgo settle into memory, a subtle shift begins to take place. The focus slowly pulls away from individual signs and drifts outward toward the larger pattern that holds them all. The zodiac, when viewed as a whole, reveals itself not as a collection of labels, but as a journey, one that mirrors a human experience with surprising intimacy. This perspective changes everything. The zodiac stops being a tool for categorizing people and becomes a narrative about becoming. In its earliest form, the zodiac was never meant to define identity in isolation. It described movement, sequence, transition. Each sign flowed into the next with intention, carrying lessons forward rather than replacing them. To understand one sign fully, one had to see what came before and what followed. Meaning lived in the relationship between stages. Cancer, Leo, and Virgo form a particularly revealing arc within this journey. Cancer begins with protection and emotional grounding. Leo follows with expression and self-recognition. Virgo completes the cycle with refinement and service. This is not a personality test. It is a developmental story. In ancient thought, human life was understood in stages: birth, growth, contribution, and preservation. The zodiac reflected this rhythm. Cancer aligned with early emotional bonds, the need for safety, attachment, and care. Leo represented the flowering of identity, the desire to be seen, to create, to assert presence. Virgo marked a moment when responsibility took precedence over expression, the realization that life requires maintenance, not just passion. Seen this way, the zodiac becomes deeply human. Everyone moves through these stages repeatedly, not once. A project begins with care, gains confidence, and then demands refinement. Relationships start with emotional connection, grow through shared joy, and survive through attention and effort. The zodiac is not linear destiny. It is a cyclical experience. This understanding challenges the modern tendency to reduce astrology to labels. When signs are treated as fixed traits, their deeper wisdom is lost. Cancer is not emotional. Leo is not egotistical. Virgo is not critical. These are surface impressions detached from context. In truth, each sign represents a necessary function within a larger system. Cancer teaches how to feel and protect. Leo teaches how to express and lead. Virgo teaches how to sustain and improve. Remove any one of these functions, and the system collapses. A life without Cancer lacks emotional safety. A life without Leo lacks confidence and creativity. A life without Virgo lacks stability and continuity. Ancient cultures understood this interdependence. They did not ask which sign was better. They asked how balance could be maintained. Excess in any one stage led to problems. Too much Cancer became stagnation. Too much Leo became arrogance. Too much Virgo became exhaustion. Harmony emerged through movement. This movement is the heart of the zodiac. It is not about predicting outcomes, but about recognizing phases, knowing when to nurture, when to shine, when to refine. This awareness allowed people to align their actions with time itself. The zodiac also offered psychological comfort. It suggested that inner struggles were not personal failures, but part of a larger rhythm. Periods of withdrawal were not weakness. They were Cancer moments. Periods of confidence were not arrogance. They were Leo moments. Periods of self-critique were not self-hatred. They were Virgo moments. This reframing softened judgment. People learned to see themselves as moving through states rather than stuck in flaws. The sky offered permission to change. Even in ancient societies, where astrology was deeply respected, there was caution against literalism. The stars were guides, not rulers. They mirrored tendencies, not commands. Free will existed within rhythm. Choice existed within pattern. This is why astrology endured. It did not promise certainty. It offered perspective. It helped people step back from immediate emotion and see their lives within a wider context. When the zodiac is understood as a journey, it becomes a map rather than a verdict. Maps do not dictate where you must go. They show where you are and what lies ahead. The traveler still chooses the path. This perspective also reveals why astrology has always been tied to storytelling. Stories carry progression. They have beginnings, middles, and transformations. The zodiac sequence mirrors mythic structure. Cancer is the origin. Leo is a hero's emergence. Virgo is a return with wisdom. In this light, the zodiac resembles the inner arc of growth described in countless myths and philosophies. Protect the vulnerable self. Discover your power. Learn how to use it wisely. Then repeat. Modern culture often disconnects these stages. It encourages expression without grounding, ambition without care, productivity without rest. The zodiac offers a counterbalance. It reminds us that life cannot skip steps without consequence. The calming quality of this realization is profound. It allows people to stop fighting themselves, to recognize that feeling withdrawn does not mean something is wrong. It means a Cancer phase is active. To understand that the urge to express does not require justification. It means Leo energy is rising. To accept that noticing flaws does not mean failure. It means Virgo is doing its work. This awareness reduces anxiety. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" the question becomes, "Where am I in the cycle?" This shift transforms self-judgment into self-understanding. The zodiac also encourages patience. Cycles take time. You cannot rush harvest before planting. You cannot refine something that has not been expressed. You cannot express something that has not been felt. Each stage prepares the ground for the next. Ancient observers saw this clearly in nature. Attempts to force growth led to damage. Harmony came from alignment, not control. The sky modeled this lesson every year. When viewed through this lens, astrology becomes less about prediction and more about companionship. The stars do not tell you what will happen. They remind you that change is normal, that movement is constant, that you are not alone in your experience. This is why astrology often resurfaces during times of uncertainty. When the world feels chaotic, people look for patterns, not to escape responsibility, but to regain perspective. The zodiac offers a language for describing internal states that are otherwise difficult to articulate. Cancer, Leo, and Virgo speak to some of the most fundamental human experiences: the need to feel safe, the need to feel seen, the need to feel useful. These needs do not disappear with time. They repeat in every life, in every generation. The zodiac's genius lies in its simplicity. 12 signs, arranged in a circle, reflecting endless variation. Enough structure to offer guidance. Enough flexibility to allow individuality. When the zodiac is treated as a journey, it becomes deeply inclusive. No one is defined by a single sign. Everyone carries all signs within them. Different moments activate different energies. Long after the first myths were spoken and the earliest calendars carved into stone, something curious remained unchanged. People kept returning to the same symbols, the same stories, the same quiet habit of looking up and wondering what, if anything, the sky might be saying back to them. Empires collapsed, languages vanished, religions rose and transformed, yet the zodiac lingered, not loudly, not forcefully, but patiently, like a familiar path worn into ground by countless passing feet. What makes these stories endure is not accuracy or proof. It is resonance. The zodiac does not survive because it predicts the future. It survives because it describes the inner weather of being human in a way that feels strangely familiar, even across centuries. Cancer, Leo, and Virgo linger because they speak to needs that never disappear. The need to feel safe, the need to be seen, and the need to make sense of what we built. When ancient people told these stories, they were not trying to entertain. They were trying to orient themselves in a world that often felt unpredictable and unforgiving. Myth was a way to soften uncertainty, to place fear and hope into a framework that could be carried from one generation to the next. The zodiac offered continuity in a fragile world. That continuity matters more than it seems. Human lives are short. Individual memory fades quickly, but shared symbols outlive us. They become emotional landmarks, reminding each generation that their struggles are not new and their questions are not isolated. Someone before you felt this. Someone before you wondered this. Someone before you looked at the same stars and felt the same quiet unease, the same flicker of comfort. Cancer's story lingers because the need for emotional safety never ends. No matter how advanced societies become, humans still long for belonging, for home, for something steady beneath their feet. Technology changes the surface of life, but it does not erase vulnerability. The symbol of Cancer remains relevant because it acknowledges fragility without shame. It tells us that retreat is not failure, that protection is not weakness, and that care is a form of strength. Leo's story persists because the desire to be seen is timeless. Every human wants to know that their presence matters, that their voices weight, that their existence leaves some trace beyond silence. Leo speaks to this hunger openly. It does not apologize for it, and in doing so, it normalizes a need that many people quietly carry but rarely admit. Virgo's story endures because life is not sustained by passion alone. It requires effort, maintenance, attention. Even in modern times, when systems feel automated and abstract, someone is always behind the scenes making sure things function. Someone is noticing errors, correcting mistakes, tending what others overlook. Virgo validates this invisible labor. It reminds us that meaning often lives in repetition, not spectacle. Together, these signs form a quiet explanation for why people keep returning to astrology even when they claim not to believe in it. They are not returning for answers. They are returning for recognition. The zodiac offers a mirror, not a command. It reflects experiences back to us in a language older than theory. Another reason these stories linger is their gentleness. Unlike rigid doctrines or absolute claims, zodiac myths allow ambiguity. They leave space for interpretation. You can see yourself in them without being trapped by them. This flexibility allows the zodiac to adapt to changing cultures without losing its core. As societies became more scientific, astrology lost its authority over prediction, but it gained something else, a psychological role. It became a tool for reflection rather than instruction, a way to talk about emotion, identity, and change without demanding certainty. In moments of personal transition, people often find themselves drawn back to these symbols, not because they believe the stars cause their feelings, but because the symbols give shape to feelings that are difficult to articulate. Saying, "I'm in a Cancer phase," can feel easier than explaining emotional exhaustion. Saying, "This feels like a Virgo season," can communicate a need for order and recalibration without self-judgment. The zodiac also lingers because it moves slowly. In a world obsessed with speed, slowness feels radical. The stars do not rush. They do not react to trends or crises. They move at their own pace, reminding us that not everything requires immediate resolution. This alone can be deeply soothing. There's also something profoundly human about marking time through story rather than numbers. Calendars tell us when something happens. Myths tell us what it feels like when it happens. The zodiac bridges this gap. It turns time into narrative. It allows people to say, "This part of the year feels like this," and feel understood. Cancer feels like memory. Leo feels like warmth. Virgo feels like order. These associations are emotional truths rather than factual claims. They persist because they align with lived experience. Another reason the zodiac lingers is because it honors cycles rather than linear progress. Modern culture often demands constant improvement, constant growth, constant motion forward. The zodiac quietly disagrees. It suggests that retreat is part of growth, that rest is productive, that reflection is necessary. This idea can feel like permission to slow down, permission to change, permission to not be the same person in every season of life. The zodiac tells us that identity is not fixed. It moves, evolves, and returns. There is comfort in this cyclic view. When life feels stagnant, the zodiac suggests that movement will come. When life feels overwhelming, it suggests that intensity will pass. Nothing lasts forever, not even the hardest moments. The persistence of zodiac stories also reveals something about how humans relate to uncertainty. We do not need certainty to feel calm. We need coherence. The zodiac offers a coherent framework where change makes sense, where emotional shifts have context. Ancient cultures used the zodiac to prepare rather than predict. Knowing the season helped people anticipate needs, prepare shelter, store food, adjust expectations. In modern life, the zodiac serves a similar psychological function. It helps people contextualize their inner states instead of fighting them. There's also a shared intimacy in zodiac language. When someone mentions a sign, they are not just stating information. They are opening a door to conversation about temperament, habits, and feelings. The zodiac becomes a social bridge, a gentle way to explore inner life without confrontation. Cancer invites conversations about home and security. Leo opens discussions about confidence and creativity. Virgo allows reflection on work, health, and self-expectation. These are not trivial topics. They are the core of daily existence. The zodiac lingers because it speaks in metaphor rather than command. Metaphor invites exploration. It allows people to find meaning without being told what to believe. This open-endedness keeps the stories alive. As the world gradually quiets and the last movements of the day fade into stillness, there's a feeling that comes when one imagines standing beneath the same stars that watched over humanity long before memory had shape. It is not awe in a dramatic sense, nor fear, nor even wonder alone. It is something softer, a sense of continuity, of being one moment in a long, unbroken line of moments that stretches far behind and far ahead. The sky does something remarkable when viewed this way. It removes urgency. Problems that felt heavy during the day lose their sharp edges. Thoughts slow. Breathing deepens. The vastness above does not diminish life below. It holds it. The same stars that ancient farmers relied on for timing their harvests, the same constellations that sailors trusted to guide them home, the same faint patterns that inspired myths and rituals, still hang quietly overhead. When you imagine those earlier lives, it becomes easier to feel connected rather than separate. Someone thousands of years ago sat near a fire, listening to crackle of wood, feeling the same night air on their skin. They, too, looked up and noticed how some stars seemed to move together, how others drifted slowly across the darkness. They did not know your name, just as you do not know theirs, yet you share this moment across time. This is where the zodiac, stripped of prediction and expectation, becomes something deeply gentle. It is not a system demanding belief. It is a shared language of observation, a way humans learned to talk to the sky when the sky did not speak back. The signs were not created to define people, but to remember patterns, to give shape to time, to anchor experience. Drifting through the same stars as the ancients means recognizing that nothing about human life has ever been entirely new. The emotions that rise and fall today, uncertainty, hope, pride, worry, care, have moved through countless lives before. Cancer's need for safety, Leo's need for expression, Virgo's need for order did not belong to one era. They belonged to being human. The ancients did not separate these needs from the sky. They saw a reflection everywhere. When the moon grew full and then disappeared, they felt their own emotions echo the same rhythm. When the sun reached its peak and then slowly declined, they understood that strength, too, has seasons. When harvest came, they felt both gratitude and the quiet knowledge that abundance must be handled carefully. These realizations were not rushed. They emerged slowly, night after night, through patient watching. The sky taught humans how to wait, how to notice, how to accept that some things cannot be forced. In modern life, waiting has become uncomfortable. Silence feels empty. Stillness feels unproductive. Yet, when you imagine lying beneath an ancient sky, those expectations loosen. The stars do not hurry. They never have. And somehow, they have always arrived exactly where they needed to be. There is comfort in knowing that even as civilizations change beyond recognition, the sky remained familiar. Languages evolved. Borders shifted. Beliefs transformed. But the stars continued their steady motion, indifferent yet dependable. They became a kind of silent witness to everything humanity tried, failed at, rebuilt, and tried again. This witness is not judgmental. The sky does not record mistakes or successes. It does not reward or punish. It simply continues. And in that continuation, humans found reassurance. Whatever happens, the rhythm goes on. As you imagine this, it becomes easier to let go of the need to understand everything. The zodiac, in this quiet light, is no longer a system to analyze. It is a reminder that understanding has limits, and that those limits are not something to fear. Ancient observers did not expect certainty from the stars. They expected consistency. They expected return. And return is exactly what the sky offers. The same constellations rise year after year. The same patterns repeat with subtle variation. Nothing is frozen, yet nothing is lost. This balance between change and stability is what made the stars such comforting companions. They change slowly enough to feel reliable, yet never stop moving. They embody the truth humans struggle to accept, that life can be both predictable and uncertain at the same time. When you imagine drifting through these same stars, you step into that understanding. You begin to feel less pressure to resolve everything immediately. Problems do not disappear, but they soften. They become part of a larger landscape rather than the entire horizon. This is why night has always invited reflection. In darkness, the world simplifies. Shapes blur. Details fade. What remains are outlines and essentials. The sky, vast and uncluttered, encourages the same simplification within the mind. Cancer's emotional weight feels lighter under the stars. Leo's need to shine relaxes into simple presence. Virgo's constant scanning finally rests. There is nothing to fix in the night sky, nothing to improve, nothing to prepare for. There is only observation. Ancient people understood this intuitively. Many rituals were performed at night, not because the stars were thought to listen, but because humans could listen better in the dark. Without distraction, inner noise softened. Stories told beneath the sky carried deeper resonance. The zodiac likely took on its enduring power in these moments, not during daylight explanation, but during quiet storytelling, when voices lowered, when listeners leaned closer, when meaning was felt rather than debated. As the night stretched on, the stars offered a kind of companionship that required nothing in return. They did not demand attention, yet they rewarded it. Those who looked up regularly developed a relationship with the sky, a familiarity that felt personal, even though it was shared by millions. This shared familiarity is part of what makes the zodiac feel intimate even now. When you hear the names Cancer, Leo, Virgo, you're not just hearing symbols. You are hearing echoes of countless nights when those same stars were named, pointed out, and remembered. Drifting to the same stars as the ancients also means accepting that your life, too, will become part of this quiet continuity. Your worries, joys, and efforts will fade into history, just as theirs did. This is not a loss. It is a release. It means you do not have to carry everything forever. The sky carries it for you, not as memory, but as space. A place where stories dissolve back into silence. This realization can feel strangely peaceful. When individual importance softens, pressure eases. You do not need to be extraordinary to belong. You already do. The stars do not distinguish between famous lives and forgotten ones. They shine over all of them equally. Leo's solar pride transforms here into quiet dignity. Not the need to be seen, but the knowledge of existing. Virgo's careful attention transforms into trust. Cancer's protection transforms into acceptance. Under the sky, the zodiac becomes less about who you are and more about how you move, how you pass through phases, how you respond to change, how you rest when it is time to rest.